All right, good morning.
Great. So let's get started with the session today. So what I have in store for you is, a lot of stuff. So before that, let's just look at. So this is one way in which you can get in touch with me. My name is Arun. I'll be the presenter for today's session. I'm the founder of CrackVerbal, and more importantly, I've been a MBA coach, and I've worked with a lot of students who have been in your shoes. These are people who have come to me at some point and said, hey, Arun, we want to do something in our career, correct? And we want to grow. We don't even know if an MBA is an answer, correct? So see, the other thing is I would like you to question, is MBA an answer, correct? Is that what you really want to do? Why should you do it? Because you also have to understand that GMAT and all that cannot be your goal, right? Your main goal is something that you want to achieve at the end of the day. So I like to kind of coach people with regards to their career decisions. And yes, I also happen to teach the GMAT and the GRE, right? Apart from that, just wanted to share some success stories in 2020. So we got a bunch of students who got through, a variety of different programs across the world. So here are some of our students. We had the usual set of people joining ISB. So usually we have a huge number for ISB because ISB is one of the top schools that most students I've noticed want to apply to. By the way, anyone over here who wants to apply to ISB, just go ahead and let me know in the chat window. Any ISB applicants? Anybody looking at ISB? And yeah, so there are also people who have gone to other places, both in India and abroad. So a few more students. Many of them have gotten huge scholarships this year because also I think from a US market, from a Europe market, many of these colleges are looking at attracting smart, talented people, specifically from India. So that way, if your profile is really good, if your GMAT scores are, what the schools are going to look at, you should be looking at, the schools this year. I think this year is a great time. And I'm also going to be talking about the coronavirus scare. And how is that going to impact the whole application cycle in 2020, right? I see there is going to be a huge disruption, and I have certain insights that I would like to share with you on what should be your strategy when you're applying for a master's or an MBA program this year. And just to let you know that at CrackVerbal, a lot of our mentors really help us understand what the school wants. And we work very closely with our, mentors. So when we kind of, one of our offerings, the application services, you get to work with one of these people. And this is just a sample of 12. We have over 40, 50 such mentors who work very closely with me also, right? So these are the kind of people that actually you get to work with when you sign up with CrackVerbal. Just a couple of free resources so that you can, utilize what we give out for free. So first thing is, please make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel in case you have not seen the content. We have a lot of content that we share, especially with regards to the GMAT and the MBA applications bit, right? I'm just going to be also giving you the resources in the chat window. So just make sure that you are looking at the chat window. So I'll just put on all the resources so that we don't need to, so you can just go ahead and click on these links. We also have application resources on the website. We have a lot of content on our blogs, right? This is stuff that is really what we give out for free. A lot of you might be having specific questions that you would like us to answer with regards to your profile, right? So please use the last link, which is the pre-MBA profile evaluation link. And anything specific that I may not be able to cover in today's webinar, we'll make sure that you have very specific answers to your queries. This usually is a, we have a profile report, but within, after the profile report, I also put you through an expert in my team who will have a one-on-one discussion with you and try to understand your profile better, right? And just for people attending, the session today, we also have a free giveaway. We have a $69 course. This is, all videos that I've shot about the whole MBA process. So whatever I'm going to be telling you today, right, that is going to be, it's a 3-4 hour long course. It has a bunch of, very, very useful stuff, how to select B schools, how to differentiate your profile, how to answer the why MBA question. We also deep dive into various post-MBA career paths. So a ton of resource on this course. And today, we're just giving it for free. So all that you need to do is click on the last link and you get this $69 course for free, right? So good, with that out of the way, let's get started. So what is it that I have in store for you? So I just wanted to give you an agenda of what we're going to be looking at. So my agenda is to cover these 4 questions, right? The first one, the application timeline. Second one, how do I shortlist B schools? Third, what do AdComs look for in a profile when they see one? And how do I navigate the whole application checklist, right? I hear people telling me something about recommendation letters, something about, essays. Is that different from an SOP? What else is required? Do I need to take the TOEFL, IELTS? So we will cover a lot of it in the application checklist, right? So as you know, it's a lot of ground that we need to cover, but I promise you that if you're going to be with me, paying attention to what we are saying, we will make sure that from a perspective of, this would be the best 1 hour that you would be investing in yourself the whole of this week, right? So whatever tabs that you have open, whatever mobile screens that you're looking at, my request is just to focus. It's going to be just an hour, right? I'll make sure that I add, enough value so you have clarity. So let's start with the first one, right? Let's start with, what are the application timelines, right? How does it look? So I'm going to give you a very, broad overview of how each of this is going to happen, right? So some extent, this will be your time till about, let's say, June, okay? So till about June, so it looks like Jan, I will just make it June. So till about June, right, you need to be taking the GMAT, right? And when I say June, I'm talking about, let's say, June 2020. Why? Because your GMAT is pretty much going to be the first step towards everything else, correct? So that means that if you don't have a valid GMAT score, right, nothing else matters, right? Nothing else is going to really, for example, a lot of times students come and ask me saying, Arun, I'm not very clear about my post-MBA goals, correct? Should I be even thinking about the GMAT? And my response to them is usually this: the way I see the GMAT is like an insurance policy, correct? You take the GMAT, you get a good score, at least the options are open in front of you. See, if you actually miss this bus, let's say that you say, I'm still dilly-dallying whether I want to do an MBA or not. And by the time you kind of decide, no, MBA is for me, it may be just too late for you, correct? And then what happens? One more year passes by, right? And one more year of, a lot of students have come and told me that, Arun, my biggest problem is regret, correct? Which is why I call it an insurance. Because the biggest regret is, I should have done it, but I didn't do it. So many a times I tell students that, look, if you want to grow in your career and if you are looking at an MBA from a good school, from a top school, helping you go there, it is not necessary that you need to decide on it on one day. It's a process, right? You will ask people, you will talk to people, you will, attend webinars like this. In fact, I would like you to pat yourself on your back, because, this shows me that you have the right intent, right? You have the right, mind space, that you're saying that on a nice Sunday morning, when I could have been doing anything else, I'm sitting here listening to the webinar. So that's actually a very good sign, very positive sign, right? So keep that up, right? You're already kind of halfway there, because you have that need for thinking why I need an MBA. And, my suggestion, take the GMAT, get the GMAT score. If at all you don't want to apply, it's still okay. I'll tell you, GMAT will teach you a lot of things. It will teach you how to write correctly. Critical reasoning will teach you how to apply logic to any situation. If you look at reading comprehension, it will tell you how to kind of, summarize a lot of content into very specific, information. So I think if you kind of enjoy, this whole process, and if you want to take the GMAT, please do so by June. The reason is, if you don't, do that for June, right? What will happen is, okay, by the way, Tejas, please post your questions in the Q&A box so that it's easier for me to look at it when I'm kind of done with the, this. So this is till June, okay? Now, why I'm saying this is because you would want, let's say, a 2-month buffer, correct? A 2-month buffer where you are researching about B School. And when I say researching about B School, I will tell you some specific ways in which you can do this. But a lot of times students think it is going to the school website and just clicking on some links and getting some data, such as, what is their average GMAT score and so that. That is not B School research, right? That anybody can do. That's a very clerical thing, right? Think about it. You are going to do an MBA, right? What is the biggest thing that is bearing on your mind? The biggest thing that is bearing on your mind is the ROI, correct? So what you need to do is you need to now tell, okay, what is it that I want to do post my MBA, right? What are the qualities that I'm looking for in an MBA program, correct? Now you go and talk to people, right? Go and talk to people who are currently studying in the MBA program. Where are these guys? All these people are available on LinkedIn, correct? So you need to know how to approach them on LinkedIn correctly. Just don't go and, bombard them with like a bunch of LinkedIn, messages, and they will tend to ignore, correct? But just politely go and ask, say, hey, I looked at your profile. I'm really interested in this school, and just don't ask them then, right? Then, subsequently, maybe you can connect with them now, right? And then you can go back to them in June, July and say, hey, remember we connected and I told you, well, this is my GMAT score and I'm planning to apply to your school. And, I would like to see if, you could have 5 minutes to answer my questions. And then you could ask them questions specific about what your requirements are from a B school. Don't look at it as B school is going to pick you. You also need to think, why should I pick that B school? Because it's 1-2 years of lost opportunity cost, number one, right? And number two, you also have the other deal, which is, it's an expensive proposition, correct? If you're going to go outside of India, it's going to cost you perhaps more than 1 crore, but even in India or in Europe, it's going to cost you a good 50-60 lakhs if you take all of it, if you include the opportunity cost, correct? So that's where what I would suggest, take time to do the B school research, and that clarity can come only after you take the GMAT, because GMAT scores to a large extent play a role in your B school research. See, if you have a 700, you at least know what are the kind of schools that you should target, and you will realize even schools will take you seriously only because you have a GMAT score, correct? Otherwise, there are plenty of people who go to the school. Let's say I go to, someone goes to Harvard and says, how do I get into Harvard, correct? Well, this guy says, well, we can help you, but, I don't think, we would like to engage with you because there is already a lot of information. But yes, if you're wanting to apply to our school, you will realize maybe not Harvard, but even Harvard, right? So they arrange campus visits. They have info sessions in India. So you cannot, engage with the person who is part of the, the admission committee. So, there are ways and means by which you can leverage this. And July, August, I think is the perfect timeline, because what is going to happen is your main action, okay, will start around September, okay, and it will go all the way till Jan. So Jan Feb, right? So I will talk about this. There are two rounds. One is called round one, which is usually around September, October, and then there is another round which is called round two, which is usually around January, right? Now the application, I'll get into the details, but you basically need to send in your essays, you need to send in your recommenders, transcripts, then post your application. You might be called for an interview, so you also need to plan for that, right? It could be an alum interview, it could be an AdCom interview, it could be an in-person interview, could be over Skype, right? A variety of different ways. And once you have done that, this is typically, I would say, if you have applied in, R1, then this could start as early as Jan, but at least from March onwards, correct, your main focus would become what are the pre-MBA courses I need to take, orientation courses. In case you are applying outside of India, you need to look at visa requirements. There could also be some finances, right, that you would need, whether it be in terms of loans or whether it's just, kind of getting that collateral to kind of mortgage. So whatever the case be, you would need some time for that, correct? So this is your plan for the next 1 year. Questions on this? So we are right now in March 2020. This is going to be March 2021, right? So this is how the next 1 year is going to look like. So I'm just going to stop and ask if there are questions. So, okay, I'm going to take this question from Tejas at this point, which says, I would suggest if you think R3 is too late right now, go ahead and wait it out and apply in R1. Okay. Somak, great question about video questions. I'll do one thing, I'll answer it. Why don't you just go ahead and post it in the Q&A box? Okay. So take the Q&A box. So Tejas, that's what I would say. You need, if you're going to get, so I have this question which is yet to take the GMAT. So if you're not going to, if you see, the problem is you need to take the GMAT as soon as possible, correct? So you need to take it. So Tejas, my suggestion is if you have not taken it yet, focus on getting a high GMAT score, and you essentially have time till April, May, June, right? So please make sure that you take the test by that time, okay? Okay, so there is another question from Magonia. I'm sorry if I Manognia. Sorry if I kind of twisted your name. But the question is, GMAT asks you to select the college before one starts the exam. Correct. Excuse me. So you might have heard of the fact that GMAT asks you to put in 5 questions before the test starts, right? Now remember that GMAT is actually doing this because it has, in some sense, also it has to appease to the MBA schools, and the MBA schools may say that, hey, since the student is already paying $250, why don't you give him an option if he already has the clarity in mind to apply to a specific school, correct? Why should he then come to me and pay a little, pay more? So that is the original intention. So for example, let us say that the only program that you're going to be applying to is IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore, ISB, SP Jain, and say Great Lakes, okay, or XLRI GMP, correct? Now let's say there are only 5 programs that you're going to be applying to, then the strategy works very well, correct? So what happens is, we don't need to worry about this whole thing. So you just need to make sure that you put in your application with a valid GMAT score, right? So by the way, I would really request if you don't post on the chat window, right? So kindly don't use the chat window to post questions, because it's going to be hard for me to track that. Okay, please use the Q&A box and I'll make sure that I go through it. All right. So let me now kind of get to when to apply. So this is a question that a lot of you have, which is R1 versus R2 plus R3. So I just wanted to let you know that the timeline would typically be like this. There is early action round, there is R1, there is R2, there is R3. Someone asked a question about ISB having a July round. I think that could be for the YLP program, correct? So, if you don't have the YLP program, then you don't need to really worry on that, okay? Usually, early action round could even be as early as August, okay? This is typically September, October. This is usually around Jan, and this is sometimes around March, correct? Now, the thing is, every time, sorry, so the thing is, what we need to remember is whenever we kind of look at applying to a B school, the earlier you apply, the better it is, okay? So all things equal, earlier is better, correct? But see, when I say earlier is better, you also need to understand that there are some inherent trade-offs, correct? So let us take this one, which is the early action round, correct? Now, what happens in the case of early action round is you apply to these schools. For example, last year we had, I think, Duke has an early action round, correct? So there are a bunch of schools that have an early action round. I think Stern also has started a early action round. When you apply to a school in early action round, this is what you're going to tell the school. In case you make me an offer and I accept the offer, I will not apply to any other school. Okay, this is called a binding offer. Now, what a binding offer means is if you are applying to a school in early action round, this is really a school that you would like to take up. Okay, so if you are not sure whether you want to take up that offer, please don't apply to a school in early action round. It's kind of stupid, right? Because you want to apply to that school with the intent of taking up the offer, right? And in case you don't want to kind of commit yourself to such a program, you can always look at R1, right? And then you have R2, and then you have R3. As I said, earlier is better. I'm not trying to say that you cannot apply in R2, just that planning things, will make, if I would plan it better, this is what I would do. I would apply to a bunch of schools in R1, and in case I don't get through, I will probably keep R2 as my backup plan. I'll keep it as my plan B, right? Since we are in the month of March, right? If there is just a sliver of hope for people, if they want to apply in R3, but my suggestion, as someone said, Tejas asked, if you have not taken the GMAT at this point, then forget R3. It is better for you to focus, get a higher GMAT score, and apply either in early action round or in R1 in 2020. Okay, that's as far as the rounds are concerned. And as I said, please post it on the Q&A window. Towards the end, I will try to answer the questions. But remember, I'm going to be answering a lot of your questions as we go ahead. So I don't want to stop at this point. Let me just kind of keep going ahead, right? So now let us answer this question. How do I shortlist B schools, right? And especially when there are so many rankings, it can get very confusing, right? We don't know whether a particular school which is ranked highly in one is, like if you see FT rankings, they would be very different than, let's say, rankings from The Economist, right? Or it could be ranked different from US News. So how do I really shortlist? Well, this is the 4 things that I would suggest you look at when you are shortlisting a B school, right? What are these 4 things? So the first thing is profile fitment. Second is career prospects. Third is geography. Fourth is chances of admission. Okay, so this is like a framework or a filter that you can use. So whenever you're looking at various B schools while you're doing your research phase, right? By the way, you can start doing your research even now, correct? It's always good to explore colleges. The final decision may happen after you take the GMAT, but at this point, you at least have a sense of, what these schools offer. So the first thing is in terms of profile fitment, right? Is this a school where I really want to be? So my suggestion, when you go through the school's website, when you go through their YouTube channel, when you read about students, when you talk to students, ask yourself, would I fit in well into this, kind of environment? Now, one way to look at it is look at what I would call as the demographics, right? Are these people similar to you in your experience? For example, let me give a difference between, let us say, a program like IMD in Switzerland, okay, an excellent 1-year full-time program, right? It has 90 different nationalities. Okay, sorry, about 50 different nationalities, okay, in, guess how big the class size is? In just 90 students. Very small class size, 90 students, 1-year, full-time, top-ranked program in Europe. Do you know what is the average age of this program? 31 years. Now, if you are 26, correct? You know what? This program may not be for you, right? Because see, these schools also have a certain demographic that they attract, right? So you always will get exceptions to the rule. You will always have, someone very young or someone very old. But overall, try to understand what are the dynamics for each school, right? So I just gave an example of IMD, but if I were to take, let's say, the example of Stanford, correct? So if you look at Stanford, if you look at their MBA, right, you will realize that usually it is taken by, people who are a lot younger. Why? Because, Stanford is going to really look at people with high potential. You probably have already done a lot in your life by the time you're 23, 24. Chances are you went to an Ivy League undergrad. In the US, it could mean going to, let's say, a MIT or a Columbia. In India, it could be going to, let's say, IIT Bombay, computer science, graduated, worked in Google for 3 years, started your own company, sold it. I'm just giving you an example, right? But the thing is, look, that guy may be 24, but, this guy is good enough, right? He has already shown, exhibited what it takes for someone to succeed, correct? So if you are 31, right, applying to Stanford is going to be a tough job because really Stanford is not older applicant friendly, correct? So in some sense, you need to look at what kind of profiles that typically fit into that school. Secondly, you also need to be looking at what are the pre-MBA industry and function people are coming from. So let me give an example. Let's take ISB. What do you think maximum ISB graduates, what do you think their background is in? Okay, I think this number is close to 70 or 80%, right? They are all engineers, right? So if you really go to ISB, though they talk about diversity and you will get functional diversity, but to a large extent, you're not going to be getting, people from really, really diverse background. Let's say it cannot be compared to an IMD, correct? So you also want to know whether, there are Indian students, what kind of, so I have had students have reservations saying, I don't want to go to a place where, 50% of the class is Indians, correct? So fair enough, right? If you're going all the way abroad, you might want to have more cross-cultural connections, right? So those are the kind of things. And finally, as I said, these are all demographics. This is more of the psychographic, what does the school like? So you look at the kind of motto the school says, look at the kind of programs they offer, the kind of opportunities that you're going to get while you are in college. And that's what you're going to be taking into consideration as the first factor. The second factor, and kind of connected to what I said earlier, which is where do people eventually end up? Is this school going to help me get to where I want to get, correct? So make sure that you understand what is your dream role or what is the kind of profile that you're looking at. Just check, can you get me one person, okay, in that MBA program who has done what you want to do? Just one person, okay? See, the thing is, if you're able to guarantee one person can do what you have done, that basically proves that there is possibility. See, we are not looking at probability. Whether you get that job or not is a different thing, okay? But whether it's possible is a more relevant question to ask. So instead of worrying about whether I'll get the job, ask yourself, is such a job even, possible after I graduate? So I'll give you a couple of examples, right? Let us say today, if you are into brand marketing and if you want to go to US and work as a brand marketer, okay, as a brand manager in an FMCG company, right? You know what? No employer is going to touch you. There is really no jobs in the US for such a role, correct? And there are a lot of reasons for it, right? But H-1B visa, the cultural empathy that is required, a lot of things. The point is, if you're going to write that in your application, you're going to really, so they want to make sure that you also have clarity. So A, from an application perspective also, it's kind of suicidal. B, from your own B school selection perspective, right? This is a very key aspect that you need to take. Just one thing that I wanted to kind of warn you, which is make sure that most schools publish the data are self-reported, correct? They are self-reported. They don't reflect career change. So these are the things that you need to keep in mind, that all that you see, may not be exactly what it says to be. Excuse me. Now, one useful resource that I would like to share with you is linkedin.com/edu. So you can actually go here and you can look up the alumni from a particular school, correct? So you can actually go and see if you can find people who graduate from, let's say, the last couple of years, who all have, let's say, a similar background to you, correct? Now, that would be the kind of person that I would like to talk to, right? Someone who has similar background and who has graduated from that school, because it's easier for you to connect with that person as well, correct? Now, this is the third criteria is around geography. So you need to understand the pros and cons behind, Indian versus foreign MBA. So what are the pros of being in India? Well, A, you understand the culture, you understand the job market. This is really your comfort zone. What are the cons? Well, the opposite, right? You are in your comfort zone. So if you really want to grow, you want to explore the world, if you're, let's say, fairly younger in your career, your risk-taking ability is more, and you feel that this is the right time to invest in yourself for a global career, please go ahead and do that, right? Because there is a right time and right place for everything. I just tell people that doing an MBA is like getting married, right? There is really no right time, or, it's just that you need to be in the right mind space. You need to ask yourself, what I want from an MBA program. And once you realize what you want, I think making the decision between Indian and foreign MBA is going to be a lot easier. The way I see it is, Indian MBA is like a fixed deposit, right? It may not give you substantial returns, but is fairly safer, okay? Whereas if you look at foreign MBA, it could be like stock market, correct? So sometimes that could be up, sometimes that could be down, but you know that overall, in a longer term perspective, if you are looking at an investment channel, primary markets or stocks will always give you higher returns, because you also have this power of compounding, correct? So even in a top MBA, what happens the moment you come out of that school, your brand credentials are only so much, right? Then you build your network, then you get more perspective, you know how to network, and over a period of time, a top MBA will definitely be able to pay its ROI. Correct? Even when you look at within countries, for example, if I were to look at Europe, I think good question to ask is UK versus, continental Europe. UK, it is English speaking. They drive on the left-hand side of the road. They watch cricket, right? A lot of things are common. Plus, with the new visa regulation, which allows you 2 years of post-study work permit in UK, I think UK has come out as a fantastic new destination. And you have the rest of the countries in, you have Spain, you have a couple of great programs there, you have France, so you always have a bunch of options. There is always this US versus Canada question that comes. So students ask me, Arun, what do you think current climate? Should I apply to US, keep Canada, or apply to Canada, keep US as a background? Here is what I have to tell, right? My suggestion is, in the event you kind of apply to a program in US, right? Keep Canada as a backup, right? And if you're applying only to programs in Canada, maybe you want to apply to a few programs in the US as well, correct? So I would say don't keep it as a or, keep it as an and, correct? So you can apply to both places. Let's see how it works out, because if you ask me right now, very clearly, from a visa perspective, Canada beats US hands down, correct? But see, the other thing that you also need to realize is Canada is not an economy that is as large as the US, correct? The US is definitely a much larger economy, which means more options for you, more opportunities for you. Being in Canada, you might be, kind of siloed into, let's say, a few regions such as Toronto, right? So most of the jobs are around Toronto. Not many people go to places like Quebec, which is still predominantly French speaking, right? Um, uh, so there is also a question that I'm just going to take, which is Tejas. Again, I would request, please don't use the chat window. If you're going to post it on chat, I will not be taking your questions going ahead. Okay, please put it on the Q&A window. You also have Southeast Asia, you have Australia. I think Australia is, according to me, it's one of those underrated MBA programs, right? You have some really good MBA programs in Melbourne Business School, AGSM, Sydney to start with. And overall, I think, if you look at Australia, it is similar to Canada, correct? From an immigration perspective. So my suggestion is, look at all of these. Ask yourself, see, once you ask yourself the question of what you want from an MBA program, I think, these questions become very easy. So even if, for example, you are applying to the US, correct? And let's say you are a tech background, right? If you're a tech background, then West Coast schools could may make a lot more sense, right? Stanford, Berkeley, Haas, UCLA, Anderson, right? But if you're a guy who comes from a finance background, right, or a person from a finance background, New York, such as Stern or Columbia, may make more sense to you, correct? So my suggestion is, look at it more from a perspective of what you want. Think of an MBA as a vehicle to get you to your destination, correct? So unless and until you have clarity on what you want, you will not be able to have clarity on how to get there, correct? And along with that, also please be a little realistic, right? See, everybody wants to get into Harvard and Stanford and Wharton, but not everyone does it, right? So here is what I would say. Let's keep a very simple thumb rule, and it's very easy. I know it's a very, it's a hack, correct? But here is my hack. My hack is, if you have a GMAT of 650, correct? Here is what I would say. Any school, okay, and if you have, let's say the school's average is 650, and let's say you have 680 plus, I'm going to call it safe. If you are around the 650 mark, I'm going to call it reach. But if you are, let's say, 20 points below that particular school's average, let us call it stretch, correct? Again, I am oversimplifying it just because GMAT is a nice 3-digit number. You take subjectivity out of the equation and you look at it as a purely objective decision, correct? So here is what I would suggest. Pick 2 stretch, 2 reach, 2 safe, correct? So this basically will give you a mix of about 6 schools. And what will happen is these could probably give you better scholarships, correct? So you also have an option of getting scholarships from schools that are not ranked very high, but could give you tremendous ROI. So one of the students that I worked with last year, he went to UTD, Texas, the Naveen Jindal School of Management. It is ranked 35 if you were to look at Business Week. It is ranked 37 if you look at US News. It's not a top 10 college for sure, correct? But it's in Texas. Texas today is, is like the new California. It's a cheaper California, if I could put it that way, right? So a lot of companies are moving from California to places like Texas, Dallas and Plano. And so what really happened is he got 100% scholarship, which means his entire MBA, 2 years of living there, staying there, enjoying, tuition, everything put together came out to under 10 lakh rupees, correct? Now, when you get such an option, such an incredible ROI, correct? It just makes so much sense for you to, kind of look at schools like that, right? So, though it may not be a Harvard, but, I think he's really enjoying his time, studying in that school. So, also try to look at schools that may not be dream, but can give you good ROI. That's about B school selection. Now, coming to this question, what do admission committees look for when they look for a particular profile, right? See, essentially, remember that MBA is not looking at people who are already successful. They are looking at people who have a potential for success in the future, correct? So that's what I always maintain, that, MBAs don't make people, successful, but successful MBAs people make an MBA program look great, correct? So if I get a really smart guy, so I'll give an example, right? So one of my students, many years ago, Raviraj Jain, he was from IIT Bombay, 750 GMAT, really smart guy. He had started something on his own while he was in college called Hello Intern, got covered by 27 different publications, right from Business Week to Business World to all these, usual publications. He appeared in CNBC TV, in Young Turks program. And, he had the picture perfect resume, right, to a large extent. And the thing is, he got into Harvard Business School. So he graduated in the year 2013, correct? Now, the thing is, I know for a fact that Raviraj has all the ingredients to be super successful in life. Very honestly, he doesn't need a Harvard MBA, correct? But the point is that the Harvard MBA for Raviraj is actually a gold-plated credential. Think about it. It's a credential, right? It is like they have this ISI mark or egg mark or, some kind of branding, right? Like for gold, they have this, 99% purity standard or something. See, it's just a thappa that people are getting, right? That I went to Harvard Business School, which means you will trust that I'm smart, that I'm able to bring results, that I'm hardworking. All these things are given to you, correct? Now, in return, what happens is these people who have these qualities, they end up, being really successful at their workplace. And when they are really successful at their workplace, guess what is going to happen? People are going to come and say, wow, this guy seems to be really smart, right? What happened to him? And then people will say, oh, well, he went to Harvard Business School, right? So, it kind of works in that symbiotic way, correct? So these schools are very clear that they want to pick people who are winners, right? People who they know will give them maximum ROI, okay? ROI from a B school angle, because the B school is also going to invest in you, right? So some of the things they look for: academic potential, the kind of work experience you have, the kind of leadership and diversity you're able to show, your own personality, and finally, how clear you are with your goals, right? So when it comes to academic potential, your undergrad institute, your GPA, your GMAT scores, in case you have any patent or research, you can show that. Or if you have done your master's, if you have any certifications, you can definitely do that. Now, if you think about it, in this whole equation, what is the one thing that you can really change, correct? So if you ask me, there are two things that you can change, but I would say the biggest thing is your GMAT scores. What GMAT scores do you need? As high as possible, correct? So let no one fool you into saying, oh, GMAT is just one aspect. We look at your overall profile. Not true. They look at GMAT scores, and higher the better is the formula there, correct? Also, in case you are interested in a particular branch, in case you are interested in something, please go ahead, and educate yourself. There are a lot of resources out there, a lot of online courses. So when you take these courses, take these certifications, by itself, it's not going to compensate, for example, something like this. right? So if a guy went to IIT Bombay, went to computer science, he always is going to have an advantage over someone who went to a mediocre, engineering college and got mediocre grades, right? So I'm not trying to say that all of these factors are on the same level, but this will basically give you a slight positive push, right, as far as academic potential is concerned. Work experience, they look at your employer, they look at the pedigree, how hard is it for you to get a job at that particular place. And see, this is also part of the whole pedigree game, right? Like, just like I told you that Harvard gives you that stamp, even your employer is giving you a stamp, right? So if you're working for McKinsey, Google, Microsoft, any of these companies, right, or Goldman Sachs, or let's say a boutique consulting firm. Raviraj, by the way, worked for a company called A.T. Kearney as a management consultant. So these are the kind of things that tell you that, look, there is already a pre-selection done. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been at that employer, correct? So B School is also trying to reduce its risk by seeing if someone else has already qualified it for me. So when they say that this guy has gone to an Ivy League undergrad or has gone to IIT or has worked in a top company, they are already pre-qualifying you, correct? They also look for, whether you have been able to progress in the career, because getting into a company is one thing, but I'm pretty sure many people in your own company would be applying to a B School this year, right? If you're working for a large company, that is. So how do you differentiate yourself? What kind of career progression can you show, right? One thing that I wanted to just answer, I usually get this, is bigger always better? The answer is no, correct? For example, I don't think working for the Indian Railways is going to be considered as stellar work experience just because you have, a large employer. I mean, it's one of the largest employers in the world, right? But that's really not the point, right? You could be working for a smaller company, 100 employees, 50 employees, but you're doing real cutting edge work. There is a lot of PR that your company is able to generate, that you are able to generate. That, according to me, is a bigger deal. And they will focus on your roles and responsibilities. So it is not just having a title. I've seen many people working in banks, they have a title which says, AVP, Associate Vice President, Assistant Vice President. But when you really look at what they do, they are not doing. They are usually a business analyst, correct? Now it is just that in banking, it's a usual kind of thing that they give you fancy titles. So they will look at your roles and responsibilities. You need to be able to impress them with that. The third thing they look at is this a person who is just passively going to work, coming back every day, or is he able to contribute more, right? So either you can at work or outside of work, do a bunch of things that, that could tell that, look, this guy is a real leader. He has energy, he has the drive, and he has the, whatever, dedication, patience, focus, right? It is like running a marathon, correct? If you notice, if someone tells you that I run a marathon, it is not the physical act of running a marathon that usually impresses people, correct? What impresses people is the fact that this guy has the patience and motivation to, let's say, wake up at 5 a.m. and go for a run every single day, right? It tells me that you're very disciplined. It tells me that you're very dedicated towards your work. It tells me that when you have focus, you will achieve what you set out to achieve. These are all small things that are telling me something more about you, correct? So that's what I really want to know, what extra did you do? So when I talk about the work also, please don't talk about what you're expected to do, right? Innovation, if it was part of your job role, then it is not exciting. Tell me something that was not part of your job role. Tell me something that you did over and above, correct? Just because you are interested, you are motivated. That, according to me, in my book, is leadership. Number 4, what they look for is some amount of diversity. And here is where I think, there is this thing called IIM, right? Which expands to Indian IT male, right? So this is the most demographically disadvantaged, demographically challenged profile, because there are a lot of people from an Indian IT male who apply. In which case, my suggestion is, your passion should then become your diversity card, correct? So if there is some interest that you have, if you're being able to cultivate that interest, if you're able to show progress, if you're able to show traction in that area of interest, that can then become your diversity card. For example, right, you are someone who has an interest in a rock band, right? And you've been jamming with your group, right, for the last 3 years. By the way, I've had students who have done that. For the last 3 years, he has been jamming with his group. He goes for all these gigs. He works in an IT company, but he's like a closer rock star, right? And, he sings very well. He's the lead vocalist. Right now, that makes it a little different for me, right? A little diversity. By the way, there is also people from the LGBTQ community today who are applying for MBA programs. That also, in some sense, is diversity. So think of diversity not just in terms of, things like country, gender, industry. That is one way to look at it. But it also is about the unique perspectives that you can bring to the table when you join the class. If they feel that, well, this is a guy I want to be having in my class for a discussion, well, you've kind of nailed this point. And the last thing is, the penultimate thing is, you also need to look at your personality. So someone asked me this question, and I'm going to be, kind of answering it now, which is a lot of these schools, what they have done is, along with your written essays, they are also expecting you to give in a video essay. If you look at Kellogg, if you look at Rotman, if you look at a bunch of schools, Cambridge, Oxford, they all have started this video essay. Now, what happens in a video essay is, after you kind of fill in your application, they will give you a link. So when you go to that link, you can have practice sessions, by the way, but when it starts, what it will do is it will use your laptop camera, and you will basically have to answer the questions that come up on the screen. Now, some of these questions could also be questions that will be given to you in advance. They will say, for example, the question is, tell us in 2 minutes, describe yourself to your classmates, correct? Now, you have 2 minutes to answer this question. You can practice it and you can do this. The second is, it could also be an impromptu question. So what happens in an impromptu question is, the question will come on the screen and the timer will start. For example, the question would be, tell us a time when you failed. What did you learn, correct? Now, 2 minutes, after I think it gives you about 30 seconds to think, and then the timer will start, okay? Recommendation letters, interviews. See, you can fake whatever you want in all of the other steps, but interview is a place where very clearly they are going to get to know your personality. They will think, they will see your depth of thoughts, correct? For example, let me just ask you a very simple question, right? And I want all of you to think about it. Don't answer, but think. How is the coronavirus going to impact your work? And when I say your work, don't tell that, oh, Arun, now I get to work from home, or, we have this corona awareness. What I mean is, how does it impact your business? Are you in manufacturing? If so, does the supply chain get disrupted? Are you in retail or hospitality? In which case, do you see a downturn in the business, right? What are the businesses that you think might benefit from this coronavirus spread, right? So I want you to start thinking along those lines, because an interview is nothing but having a very intelligent conversation, correct? It is not about quizzing you, right? They're not going to ask you GK questions. Acha, tell me, what is the name of the animal market where, the coronavirus started from, right? Nobody asks you such, childish questions. People ask you mature questions, but they expect mature answers also, right? So that's as far as personality is concerned. And finally, having goal clarity, very, very important. Here are, the questions that I want you to kind of, by the way, this video or webinar will be available to you post this. I think by tomorrow it will be published, but make sure that you answer these 6 questions. Sorry. First one, where do you want to go? Okay. What is your short-term, mid-term goal? Nobody is worried about your long-term goal, 10, 20 years, nobody bothers about it. Immediately after you graduate, so this is immediately after you graduate, and this is about 3 to 5 years after you graduate. Where do you want to go? Correct? That's the first question you need to answer. Second, why do you want to go there? Why is that goal your passion? You need to tell them, right? What about your background, correct, is also important. Why are you the best person to reach there? What is your background? Why do you think you are the most equipped to reach that goal? Anybody can say that I want to be a consultant at McKinsey, correct? But what is more important to think is, why do you think I am the best guy? What in my background will give you confidence that I'll do a good job, right? Why do you want an MBA to get there? Why can't you just go there by yourself? Are you very clear an MBA is the only way to get there? Why so? Convince us. Did you try applying without an MBA? Did they say no to you? Why are you wanting an MBA? What are the key skills that you want to equip yourself before you take up that role? Correct? So I think that's where your clarity will help you. Number 5, of all the people in the world, why did you choose us? Why this particular school? And here is where the mistake that most people make. They give you very generic answers. Oh, your world-renowned faculty, a world-class infrastructure. I mean, it's a given, man. I mean, you need to now be very, very specific. What is that specific thing in that school that is going to equip you for that final goal, right? So that's the kind of clarity you need. And finally, perhaps, the toughest of all, why not last year? Why not next year? Why this year? Why is doing an MBA today the most important logical step for you? Okay, and here is one way in which you can kind of look at it. How can you make yourself the easiest choice for the B school? How can you make yourself the easiest choice for the B school? Like, the B school should look at your profile and say, or read your essays and say, you know what, this guy is the guy who needs our program, right? So that's the part that you need to convince people on. And this is something that obviously at CrackVerbal I specialize in this, which is crafting your personal brand messaging. How do you kind of, look at the potential objections? So we look at a profile, we look at various things in a profile that could potentially go against you. People don't realize sometimes, the salary is very high and they think that the B school would love me for it. No, on the contrary, the B school would get a little worried, right? The B school would said, you already are getting such a high salary. What is your expectation once you come here? So we need to look at all the aspects that a B school could get worried about, your thought process. So you want to convince them that you got the thought process in place. All right. So the last 10 minutes, we will go till about 11:45, and then I'm going to be answering your questions in the Q&A. Navigating the application checklist. First of all, you need to be writing the application essays. If you are able to answer the 6 questions that I asked you in the previous slide, trust me, this job becomes very easy. Okay. Most schools will have anywhere between 2 to 3 essays. The days of having an SOP are over. If you are applying through through GMAT for a top B school, chances are you're going to get 2 to 3 essays. Sometimes it could also be 1. Sometimes B schools, say, oh, we just have 1 essay, but that essay itself could be like a crazy essay. Okay, so I'll tell you what Harvard does. Okay, so Harvard has 1 essay, and this is what the essay, to a large extent, over the last few years, this has been the general theme. They just changed the wording a little bit, but overall the message is the same. This is what they asked you. Okay, and I want you to listen carefully. It's very interesting. They say, look, We have your transcripts, your undergrad records, your recommendation letters, your GMAT scores. We have your, so they ask you for post MBA goal and all of that. So he says, look, we have all this information about you, correct? Why do you want to come to Harvard? That's it. We have all of this. Don't bore us with more data. Don't tell me what you did at work. I already know that. Tell me something else. Okay, that's another way. I think a couple of years ago it said, tell me something more. And you know what happens at that point? Though it's just one essay, by the way, it does not even have word limits. Most B schools have different word limits, but sometimes you'll have weird things like this, right? So Harvard doesn't have any word limit. It says, you think what should be your, andaz, right? कि अपने अंदाज से you tell, you think it's 150 words, great. If you think it should be 1,000 words, sure, correct. If you think it should be 400 words, that's also fine. In some cases, for example, Duke has this 25 random things. You can actually Google for this. So Duke has this essay which says, tell us 25 random things about you. Now, what will you pick? 25 random things, right? You'll realize you can pick 3, 4, 5, but then after 10, it becomes a struggle, correct? So you do have oddball essays like this, right? This, but you also have, let's say, an ISB, which will give you very standard 2 essays. One essay, we have got to get very good quality applicants. Why should we select you? Everyone else who's applying is smart. Why should we select you? Second essay is, where do you see yourself in 2025? Where do you see yourself in 2030? Correct? These are the 2 essays that ISB has. So make sure you go through the typical essays. On our blog, we also have some sample essays. Make sure whatever clarity we discussed earlier is coming through in your essays, correct? Make sure that you have clear expectations from an MBA program. When you are writing the essay, it should be realistic that these are things you can do. What I said earlier, have a compelling story. Why should you be the easiest choice for them? What would you differentiate yourself? The English part is very important. It is not about using fancy words. It is about using persuasive writing. Okay, using the right choice of words. Again, at CrackVerbal, when we have our consultants work with you, these are the small things that we look at. And finally, we expect that the person reading your essay is not going to come from your background. So you can't afford to, assume that you can use the language that you perhaps use to communicate with your colleagues. You need to, dumb it down in some sense, make it, simple, explain it to a layman. So whatever you're doing, if you're able to explain it to a layman, that's the kind of language you should be using in the essays. People ask about recommendation letters these days. It's either 1 or 2, correct? Typically 2, but I've seen that many schools are also now going for just 1 recommender. See, the recommender has basically sat with you in office since morning till night, correct? For probably 2 to 3 years, if he's your boss, correct? Now, these schools value that judgment, correct? So that's why they have 1 which is in the supervisory role. You could get the other from a peer, client, business partner, anything. People have this question, which is, they say, Arun, what if I've recently joined a company and I don't have a rapport with anyone in my new employee? Perfectly okay for you to go back to your earlier employer and get a recommendation. But but see, you can't go back after 2 years, correct? So you also have to have a mental timeline that, look, yeah, I can give this for, maybe 6 months, but, over a year, I would say would be a stretch, correct? Can you take recommendations from friends, family? No. In fact, you can't even take it from your college profs if you have experience. If you don't have experience, you may take it from your professor, but if you have experience, you can't even take it from a college professor. People ask, Arun, designation versus relationship. I think relationship is slightly more important than designation. A, the recommender would be able to write better. You're more comfortable working with the recommender. You're not getting stressed that this is your super boss. How do I approach him? 10 p.m. ko shall I send him a reminder on WhatsApp or not? All of these things, can tend to confuse you. And in the event, you do have an alum who's going to write your recommendation letter. So let's say your manager went to ISB and you are also applying to ISB, definitely having that alumni connect in your recommendation would be a great help. Okay. B school interviews, as I said earlier, interviews are a way to gauge that you're not a paper tiger, that you're not a person who just claims to do a bunch of things on paper, on his resume, but in reality falls flat, correct? So your personality, whether you're an affable character, whether, meeting you gives them that positivity, correct? All of these they are gauging. They're also looking at people who are very arrogant, because see, that's another trait they don't want. They don't want an 800-pound gorilla who has never failed in his life, correct? Has perfect GMAT scores, perfect grades, perfect everything, but who's going to kind of really tyrannize the class. We don't want people like that as well, correct? So that's one of the things the interviews look for. Either you could actually initiate, you could actually select dates when you would like to be interviewed while you're applying, or it is by invite, which means in that case, you will have to wait for your application to be screened first, and post that the schools would reach out to you with, with a formal interview offer. Sometimes the interviews could be taken by people in the admission committee, or it could be taken by alumni, correct? So many of these top schools have alumni working across the globe. So no matter what country you are, what city you are, you will find an alum. And especially for US schools, they also conduct Skype interviews. So as I said, these days, I'm not seeing much of telephone. I am seeing more of Skype and in person. So whether you want to do Skype or in person, by the way, when I say Skype, it could be Skype slash Zoom slash WhatsApp video, right? So a variety of different modes are used. But what I've noticed is between the two is, if possible, if you think you have the right personality, if you think you would be better off meeting them, my suggestion is fly down to that city and meet that person, especially if it's inside of India, right? You can always go down to that place and meet that person. According to me, it gives a better sense of who you are. One thing about creating a business resume, there are a couple of things that you need to do in a business resume. You focus on what kind of business impact you caused. You don't focus too much on the technical details, right? Nobody's going to be interested in that. Always, if you look at it, directed, supervised, served, correct? So always try implemented, produced. Always try to start with this verb ed form, correct? That's a good way to create that parallelism. The other thing is, and this is something important, show, don't tell, correct? So one of the good parts of writing is to give numbers. You see a lot of numbers over here, correct? So if you are able to put these numbers, that would really reflect very well on your resume, correct? So again, on the website, there are resources on how to do so. The last part, I'm pretty sure most of you are wondering, how do I finance my MBA? I'm going to take that and then I'm going to get into the Q&A bit. So let's look at it. I'm basically giving you 4, 5, 6, 7 ways in which you can fund your MBA. Non-collateral loan from a foreign bank. Most of the top 5 schools in the US, for example, offer this. So if you get into a Harvard or a Stanford, they will have a tie-up with a local bank. There is no collateral required. It's completely paperless. You join the program, you will get 100% loan, and you start repaying the loan once you graduate, correct? But this is only for the top 5 schools in the world. There are very select schools. Again, I have a blog on this in the website. You should be able to find the data there. The second is what is called as a co-signer loan in case you have anyone in the US who can actually, help you with, uh, you know, a kind of a co-signer who will act on your behalf, especially if he's a close relative, right? And who's able to take a loan on your behalf. This again can be with a co-signer, correct? I also want to talk about Indian Bank and specialized institutes. So this is one big thing that has happened in the last few years, that there are some specialized institutions that give you up to 80% loans. There is no collateral. These are all fintech companies that have started, and their whole model is they have an algorithm in the background. So they take variables such as what is your current income, what is your undergrad institute, how old are you, what is your chosen field post MBA, what kind of schools you're getting that loan for. So they take all of this data, they crunch it, and they give you a loan which can, as I said, be up to 80%, no collateral required. Correct. But of course, in case you do have collateral, traditional collaterals like land and property is always there. But there are also new age collateral. For example, banks are saying if you have a fixed deposit, if you have mutual funds, if you have any kind of stocks, they will basically mortgage it against those assets as well, right? One thing that I suggest all of you to look at is self-finance. If you've been working for a few years, I encourage that you dig into your personal savings and try to take the loan amount as low as possible. Because at the end of the day, especially if you're going to be servicing a loan in India, you're looking at 11-12% interest, correct? So that's a pretty high number. So in case you already have investments, it might be a better idea to kind of disinvest over there and put it into your education. Same thing, soft loans. If you have friends, families, there is actually FFF stands for friends, family, and fool, or friends, family, and father-in-law, right? Depending on how you look at it. But the point is, if you have someone who can offer you a soft loan, the interest rate is 0, or you can have like a very small interest rate, 3%, 5%. If you're able to get someone in your family to help you, that would be wonderful. And finally, a lot of these schools, as I started, we have had students getting into, for example, Jevin, who went to Macombs, who's going to Macombs, has a whopping 60% scholarship, I think. So a lot of students getting great scholarships, but for that, you need to have good GMAT scores also. I think that's really the starting point. With that, I pretty much, so this is one way in which, for example, if Wharton is going to be $186,000, correct? This is one way in which you could approach, you could take a little bit from all the sources that I mentioned.